Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Hello, listeners. Wanted to quickly let you know that my new book launches on April Fool's Day. The title is Stick to Business, What the Masters of Comedy Can Teach You About Breaking Rules, Being Fearless, and Building a Serious Career. Look for it on Amazon. Also, I'll be launching a podcast every day around the launch. Hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jake Kroeger. Jake is a comedian, producer, and writer, and nobody knows what's going on in comedy in Los Angeles better than Jake. He created and runs the Comedy Bureau, the central source of information of everything happening for stand-up, sketch, improv, film, podcasts, clowns, and even puppets. Jake has written for Vulture, Nerdist, and LA Weekly. He's produced a comedy album and even gives an exclusive tour through the LA comedy scene via Airbnb experiences. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jake, we'll see if you did your homework.
Uh-huh.
If you weren't working as a comedian, producer, writer, or tour guide, what would you be doing?
I'd probably try to make good on that USC film degree that I have.
Oh, okay. You're one of an exclusive group.
Yeah. That's sort of the weird, fun thing about me. A lot of people in comedy, comedians, they have this idea or story of like, I was watching Richard Pryor live on Sunset with my dad, and that's when I knew. Or like, I was the class clown, and like, none of that ever happened to me. I was a very serious child. And I went to film school with these notions that I was going to be an Alfred Hitchcock type. And definitely didn't want to perform on stage. Definitely didn't want to do comedy.
So you were going to be a director?
I was going to be a writer-director. Yeah, that was my whole thing. And then when I got out of film school, I did every shitty film job you can imagine, whether it was driving a thing, getting food for things. It was a lot of just like
moving thing from place A to place B.
Yeah. Sometimes there was plugs. Sometimes it was edible, but it was mostly moving things.
I see.
For very little money. But what I found was I was so tired from doing all that stuff. All this idea of writing scripts in my downtime never happened. And then it just so happened that a friend that I had at the time wanted to get into comedy, and he also didn't have a car. So I'm a good friend, and I found an open mic, and it was an open mic where you could do like comedy or poetry or music, really anything.
When was this?
This was like 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. 2009, in fact. Actually,
do you remember the place?
Yeah. This would have been 2008 because I didn't even do stand-up for a year. It was Portfolio's Coffee House in Long Beach. And it was great because it was close enough to Cal State Long Beach. You got all these Cal State Long Beach people who are actually very, very good musicians. And
yeah, you often don't get a good crowd, a good audience for an open mic.
Yeah, especially in LA. I mean, the further outside of LA proper that you go, like when you start getting to like Pasadena or like Manhattan Beach, like there's nothing else to do. And people kind of like say, they got some singers, they got some comics or whatever. I'll stick around.
I see.
But in LA and Hollywood and all that, you're going to perform for a bunch of comics, and it's a lot of people just hustling and just like getting up. And sometimes, as a very quick sidebar, sometimes I think Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 Hours is like one of the worst things to happen to stand up. Because people think if they just do 10,000 hours of bad stand up.
Yes. Not every hour is created equal.
No. And, after that, if you just keep going up and not really questioning yourself and pushing yourself artistically, you're just going to learn to speak into the microphone clearly and then move the mic stand out of the way.
As an aside, that matters.
Yes, it does.
Because my first time ever attempting stand-up, I did that very poorly.
Yeah.
I actually disconnected the mic from the cord, which I've never seen someone do.
Really?
Yes.
It actually happens more than you think it does.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's venue dependent. Sometimes there's shoddy equipment at the venue and it just happens.
I see. So you drove a friend down to Portfolios.
Yeah, and he was a child of divorce and had very little direction in his life. He's we're not friends anymore, but that's not why.
Is he still doing comedy?
I don't even know.
I see.
But I remember just seeing him not hate it. And I'm like, all right, I guess we could just do this.
Mm-hmm.
And because they allowed anything and I was driving, I didn't want to just drive by coffee and watch a bunch of people. I had played guitar for a long time.
So you signed up?
I signed up to do one of two things. Annoyingly long Bob Dylan covers. Just like Gates of Eden, anything like 6 minutes and above.
Wait, there's no timer on this thing?
This is the sort of like painful thing about music open mics is like, they'll just say one song. And like, they don't tell you how long it is.
I see.
And sometimes music open mics are stupid enough to do 2 songs.
That could be 14 minutes.
Yeah, because it also includes your stupid intro where you think you're going to be funny. You're like, oh, I wrote this song like whenever. Just play it, man.
I see.
You just play it. So I would either do that or I would do.
You sound like someone who's run open mics.
I ran an open mic for a year.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think that is almost like prerequisite as part of like doing comedy. I think you should run some open mic or improv jam or something like that, as sketch workshop or something.
Give back, get practice.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, if you run an open mic, that's the easiest way to get comfortable on stage, is that you're just the mere fact that you're bringing up people and bringing them off stage. You're not even trying to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like letting your hands not shake and just like getting the whole sense of it.
So, previous guest, David Nihill. I don't know if you know David.
That name rings a bell.
Irish guy.
Yes. He did like a late night set recently or something like that?
He was down in LA recently.
Right.
So I had him on and he got his intro into comedy by hosting an open mic.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about the value of learning to host.
Oh, yeah.
And how important a skill that is. So the fact that this has come up in just within a few podcast episodes.
Yeah.
I think is great.
Yeah, it is definitely like, I mean, one, you get to have the thing that's yours and you get a sense of like what it's sort of like having a show, but it's like not really a show. So it's all low expectations. And in fact, there's 0 expectations. I remember that one of the first pieces of advice, and I'll get back to finishing up with portfolios.
Sure, no problem. I was going to bring us back.
Yeah. Was actually given to me by this 50-year-old guy who like switched between doing spoken word and stand-up, which is I switched between Dylan covers and spoken word because I wrote poetry in high school and I won awards for it. And I'm like, oh, I could just read this at the open mic and that would count.
Certainly.
Yeah. That I was just like not looking to just sit there. That was kind of the goal.
That says something about you.
Yeah?
I think so.
What do you think it says about me?
Well, look, I think most people, this is for the audience, Jake and I were chatting before this and we got talking about my other new project, Solo, this podcast.
Right.
So if you haven't heard about it,
give it a listen.
The title is Solo, The Single Person's Guide to a Remarkable Life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I talk about is the importance of improving your creation to consumption ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So the average person's ratio is like 1 to 30. Right. For every hour of creating that they do, they consume 30 hours of material.
Right.
And I have this. And so the average creative individual, it's almost flipped. It's probably 10 hours of creating to 1 hour of consuming. I want people to sit at 3 to 1.
Right.
Every 3 hours that they spend creating, they can spend an hour consuming.
Right.
The average person, though, is happy to sit in the open mic.
Right.
It's terrifying to go up on stage.
Yeah.
And the fact that even you who already had a reason to be there, which is to support your friend, couldn't just consume, says something about you.
Yeah.
So much so that you've created the Comedy Bureau.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't even just consume comedy. You actually have to curate it.
Right.
And then you've created this platform that serves a community.
Absolutely. In thinking about your ratio, creation to consumption.
What do you think your ratio is?
It might be 1 to 1.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Cause there's a lot of time where I'm creating and consuming at the same time.
Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
That would be like watching Steve Martin's interview today and then writing about it.
Yes.
Because it was like, I mean, I think I saw that you favorited the tweet or whatever, but I remember watching it today and like, oh, this harkens back to like Johnny Carson days. This is like fun. This doesn't seem like a producer talk through Steve, like, oh, so what have you been doing lately?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you want to promote? And they try to like kind of create this like weird arc in this 10 to 20 minute interview that will be edited down to 7 to like seem interesting and digestible online, rather than like Steve Martin obviously came in and like, all right, so we're going to do all these bits. You're not even going to bring me on directly. You're going to say my name and then you're going to be like, he's not coming out. What's going on? And then he gets a text saying like, oh, I forgot to say the Steve Martin. So sorry, everybody. Yeah. And, I mean, maybe it's a little precocious to call the late night appearances an art form, but there is an artistry to it.
When done well.
When done well.
That's the key. To me, comedy can be art when done well.
When done well. Absolutely. It can be transcendent and like beautiful even.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you asked.
Look, that's performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That text creates performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that it was just like wire to wire. Like there was a genuine moment where they talked about Monty Python, but for the most part, they were just going bit, rather than a lot of interviews kind of just sit in this puddle of like, all right, well, what's the next thing you got to talk about?
The meander, yes.
The meander. Oh, here comes a story about you getting lost in the airport or clothes at the dry cleaners or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've never heard that before.
Yes.
And there's this like weird transparency where late night has been around long enough to be like, we know that you're not friends. So why are you talking about this?
Mm-hmm.
You're here to promote a movie or TV show or whatever. And I'd much rather you, and Conan does this sometimes. Why don't you guys go out into the world and for a remote segment, have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird and fun. One that I can remember off the top of my head. Conan took Stephen Yun to a Korean spa and they both did that.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
They have a fun one with like one of his assistants like driving.
Yeah.
Drive with Kevin Hart and
she was getting her license.
Cube getting her license, right?
Yeah. And so that feels more organic. That feels more real. That obviously isn't as quote unquote produced as like conversation necessarily, that like a lot of the time it is. I mean, what effect the idea that you're like for Kevin Hart, if Kevin Hart is coming on to Colbert and he's there to promote the new Jumanji movie, am I going to see Jumanji because he's on there? I don't think that like, I know that that's the reason that they're there, but that's not the reason I'm going to see the movie.
Yes. It's a reminder for the person who wants to see Jumanji.
Right. And is that really worth all that time and effort that people put into like late night appearances?
Mm-hmm. So is this what you were writing about?
I mean, I didn't go into all of that, but I was basically kind of celebrating the idea that like Steve Martin, Steve Colbert, like having a lot of fun in a way that isn't often seen in a lot of late night interviews, because mostly it's just this promotional machine.
It's lazy.
It's very lazy.
It's lazy.
Yeah. And whenever it's not lazy, whenever there is intention behind it and creativity, and it is the thing that it's supposed to be. And it's so not that a lot of the time that like, it's just a delight to see whenever it happens. It is part of the reason I really love Jesus and Mero. Jesus and Mero is so different from everything in late night, and every aspect of it is so different. Have you seen DC?
No, I haven't.
So that's Showtime's late night show. They started out at Vice. And there are these two guys who had this podcast called the Bodega Boys, and they just riff, man. They riff, whether it be news or politics or like World Star videos or something. They just like riff. And when they had their show at Vice, they didn't even have writers. They literally just sat in Vice's conference room, put a camera on, and they had this like these graphics that were like PTI, and they just like went down topic by topic and just said now they're on Showtime, and all the trappings of late night, they're all gone. There's no desk. They're just two chairs. They all have like one guest, but they usually interview them remotely. They wear a bunch of streetwear. There's no suits.
Mm-hmm. They're breaking all the rules.
They're breaking all the rules.
That's great.
Yeah.
About time.
And it's so clear that they're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Not this faux fun.
That Jimmy Fallon. Ugh.
Yeah. Where
like I want to like Jimmy Fallon. I just don't believe that he's truly that enthusiastic.
Absolutely. There was one of the games that he plays is a game where it's just a quiz and you win puppies. And is that connected to anything that any of the guests have? No. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing that once, and Jimmy technically won, but because of how just hollow so much of that show is, he like gave the puppies to the guests because he thought it would look better.
I see.
And it's just like, what is the point of any of this?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Anyways, it's very clear that Jesus and Mero are having a lot of fun, and I mean, it's so out of the norm. I really, really enjoy it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'll put in the exhibits. So let's get back
to the open mic.
Yeah, because I think it says a little something about you.
Right.
You drive down there.
Right.
I just can't sit here. I need to participate. You have a guitar with you. You brought the guitar.
I think after the
you
first
borrowed
week,
a guitar.
I had a guitar.
Okay.
So after the first week where I just saw it, and you're just like, oh, this is what this is. Okay, I think I can and want to do that. Again, I just can't sit here. And so I would like bring in my guitar and play Dylan covers, or I'd even just like solo on the guitar for 5 minutes. Because you could also do that. I remember the first open mic performer I ever saw. It was at that place. Like, he brought an electric guitar on stage. He plugged it into a pedal, into an amp. And then he just like strummed the guitar open hand. There was like, he didn't put his fingers on any of the frets. So it was just like, over and over for like 6 minutes.
I see.
And I'm sure it sounded great in his head because he was having a great time. No one else was having a great time.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah. But,
a little too indulgent.
Oh, yeah, but that's open mics.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so my friend didn't hate it, and I just wanted to keep going and taking him and then kind of being part of this. And throughout a year, what I found was that I really loved hanging out with comedians. There was just something pure about their drive to do it. That like, they don't know whether they're going to make it big or they're going to be great.
Chances are they're not.
Chances are they're not. And I think chances are they probably know that too. But all that aside,
they're compelled.
They need to do it. And I really, really love that. And that I didn't feel that way like I did in film school. I mean, like, well, I think I had a conception of what a director did, and then that kind of got upturned when I had to direct actors. I could finagle my way through it, but I really didn't understand performance the way I do now. So yeah, I just loved hanging with, I would, after the mic, would hang out with the comedians because my friend was a comedian and I just wanted to hang out with all these people and I really got along. And then after a year, this is going to be a condensed version of this story.
Sure.
Basically, this guy, part of the reason we're not friends is he's an asshole. And, why is he an asshole? Well, one time he didn't want to go to the open mic because he didn't want to. And I was like, you want to be a comedian, right? And he's like, yeah. Well, you know, we should be probably doing more than just one open mic a week, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I know. And so why do you not want to go this week? He's like, I just don't want to. Like, you sick or something? No, just don't want to. And I just kept prodding him until he's like, okay, if you go ask out Elise, I'll let you drive me to the open mic.
Okay.
What a knucklehead. He'll allow me to let him give him a ride to this open mic. Elise was this record store manager that I happen to have a crush on. I would like hang out at her job and we like traded mix CDs and stuff like that.
But you never had the guts to ask her out.
No, but I was so pissed off that like, you don't want to go to this one open mic? This is the only thing you do with your week. Otherwise, he just plays video games.
Did you feel like it was a betrayal of the craft? Is that what upset you about it?
I think it was a betrayal of the craft and like a path that we were on.
You two were together. This was every week. This was our thing.
Yeah, this was our thing. Otherwise, our lives just felt nebulous.
I see. You had that. That's what you had.
Right. Together. I mean, I know I had my drive to do other things on my own, but I valued his friendship at the time. So I wanted to like have us do something together. And so I would just like, oh yeah? All right. I'll go ask her out right now. And I sincerely went to the mall and went to this record shop. It was so dumb and anticlimactic. I like go in, I wander around for 20 minutes. I pick up a full price CD and I like bring it to the counter. Not even working at the counter. I had to go ask, like, is Elise here? And she's like, yes, I'll go ask for her. And so I didn't even need to do any of that rigmarole. And she comes up and she's like, hey, Jake. And I'm like, hey, would you want to get coffee sometime? And she's like, oh, I'd love to. And gave me her number.
I see.
Yeah. Here's the kicker though. So 2 weeks later, we actually go on this coffee date. It's great. And we have a great time. I think we talked for like 3 hours. We're planning to do karaoke the next week. I get a text the next day that said, I'm getting this like vibe that you're, into me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to let you know that I am a lesbian with my roommate. And I hope that's okay.
So like to go do karaoke.
Yeah. If you want to be friends, I think that'll be all right. Now, I think me now would give so much a different answer because I think connection is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you can't have sex with somebody or romance, it doesn't mean that you should throw that away.
No, especially because the overlap in qualities for a friend and a lover are 75%.
Yeah. I didn't know that 10 years ago.
I see.
So I sent her this very long message that was like, yeah, I could say that we'll be friends, but 9 months down the road when you're still like a lesbian, probably get real mad because I'm really into you.
I see.
So I think I'm just going to end it. And she's like, I understand.
Yeah, sure. I see how you see how it's a missed opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, because it's hard to find people you connect with.
Right. Absolutely. And certainly I've not made that mistake in years subsequent to that. Needless to say, I was not in a good mood. And I was like, I want to talk about this shit on stage.
How very comedic of you.
Yeah. And so I did a very rookie mistake by typing out this whole set in Microsoft Word and even like trying to predict reactions in parentheses. Don't do that. Pro tip, do not do that. It will never happen the way you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, practicing it in the mirror or by myself.
Sure.
That's also not how it works. And at this open mic, what was kind of great is that you got 7 minutes.
Wow.
Which is a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And I guess this would probably also say something about me. I am very committed to doing my time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know a lot of people, I saw a lot of people at that open mic, if they are new or they just got their first set, like minute 2, they're like, what do you guys want to talk about? Yeah.
They wrap it up.
They wrap it up. Even if I got to that point, I'm like, no, I'm going to do my time. So I get up there, like we go the next week, I wrote out a whole set and I get up on the mic and there were a lot of great people that went to that open mic. One in particular was this band that had a very Zooey Deschanel-esque front, like lead singer, who I also happen to have a crush on. And for whatever reason, when I got on stage, she just came into the coffee shop and just decided to sit up front. And for the next 7 minutes, I get only one laugh. And it was a recognition laugh. Sometimes when you use a reference in a joke, somebody will just recognize it and they're like, ah.
Yeah, it's an aha laugh.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not that it's funny. It's like, I know what that is.
Yes.
So I just mentioned Phil Collins in the air tonight because I was talking about suicide or whatever. And there was this 50-year-old guy who was just like, ah. That was the only laugh I got. And my friend at the time, he taped the set and he made this sort of auteur decision around minute 3 to shoot it like an episode of The Office. Just zooming in, zooming out, willy-nilly. And I gotta give it to him, as painful as it is for me to watch.
It's fun
for
others.
It's fun for others. And specifically,
Does it exist?
It exists somewhere. It's not online.
I see.
But he zooms in on this other girl.
In her reactions.
And she, like they rehearsed it, as soon as the zoom stops, she looks at the camera and frowns. Yeah. And that hurts every time I look.
Still.
Yeah. And so the set doesn't go well, whatever. I make it to 7 minutes. I get off stage and then this girl, she comes up to me and she says, Jake, I thought you were going to do comedy tonight. What happened?
I'm like cringing right now.
Ooh, I have never physically been stabbed, but
you know what it feels like.
I know what it feels like.
Okay, well, let's fast forward ahead.
Right.
Obviously, you were undaunted.
Yeah. As terrible as that was, I still love the camaraderie of the comedy more so than anything I've gotten in film and TV. So I just kept chasing it.
Okay.
And I just kept going out to more places.
And, you start to figure things out and you talk into comics and you start to learn these things and so on.
Well, that was sort of the impetus of the Comedy Bureau. I don't know if that was what you were trying to say.
I do want to get to that. Yes.
Yeah. So
you're here because of the Comedy Bureau.
Yeah, that's how I get most places.
Okay, good. That's great.
Thank you. So what happened is in trying to go up to more places and trying to figure stuff out, there wasn't a central source of information. And it was very just kind of like everything was word of mouth. And because of that, also very unreliable. Mm-hmm. And even if you were to go to the open mic at a club and try to figure out how to get in a club like the Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory, everybody would give you the runaround. Mm-hmm. Oh, you got to talk to Tommy. Where's Tommy? You just missed him.
Yes.
A lot of that. And like, I very much like the idea of comedy being a meritocracy, but I think at a certain level, why are you hiding information like this from people?
Everybody in LA complains that you can't get good audiences.
Yeah.
You need to advertise. Mm-hmm. Make it easy for people to find out what's going on.
Right. On top of, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but I think there's a perceived high barrier of entry for audiences. People that maybe they watch 1 or 2 Netflix specials and they're like, that seems fun. Mm-hmm. I want to go see some live comedy. Where do you even start?
I agree with you. It's you don't have enough experience to vet these things.
Right. And on top of I think a lot of people have this idea that they're going to be set up front. They're going to be made fun of after paying $20 and buying 2 drinks. And that doesn't sound like fun. Why would you get a sitter and do that?
Yes.
But there's so much comedy that isn't that. And I would love to change the perception of that, where there's all these local comedy shows that happen really close to your house. People tend to be very nice.
Yes. They're happier there.
Yeah. They're happier there.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, for 95% of the time, you do not have to buy 2 drinks. And there isn't this sort of big investment financially and emotionally. You can just have a good time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did that recognition grow into, you have a web page, you have a Twitter account,
right,
which has every night of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything? Do you have everything?
I don't have everything.
But you have a lot.
I have a lot. Yeah. So for the open mics, I try to cover as much as possible. Uh-huh. In rare cases, if I've been to a mic and I feel like this is just unproductive, I won't tell people to go to that. But that's a very, very extreme case.
So you are not collecting, you're curating.
It's very much about being curated.
Okay. That's good. I think that's what people want. People want curation. They don't want collection.
And I've even gotten to, thankfully, and I know we'll take a few steps back after this, but I'm at a point now when people tell me about new open mics and they'll give me some garbage people can get 3 minutes for 2 drinks. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell people to go to that. You need to lower it down to 1 drink.
I see.
And
it violates some rule.
Yeah. It's arguably arbitrary, but I kind of said to myself at a certain point when I did these open mic listings for a while that I feel like comics shouldn't be spending more than $1 per minute of stage time.
Oh, okay.
I felt like that was fair.
Yeah, it's a rule. It's a reasonable rule.
Yeah. And so when you ask for 2 drinks for 3 minutes and then it's a lottery on top of that, so you don't even know when you're going up.
So I
feel like that's such a waste of your time. And that puts you in such a negative headspace.
Yes. It's bad for business.
It's bad for business and it's not good for you. When I ran an open mic for a year.
You know what it is? It's greedy.
It is greedy and it's short-sighted.
I agree with you. It bothers me to hear this.
The open mic I ran for a year was great because I knew that they had a great happy hour. They had $2 beers and $2 fish tacos.
That's good.
Yeah. From 3 to 9.
That's good.
Yeah. And because I didn't enforce a minimum and it was a list and people could sign up and they could know where they can get up. And I was willing to run the open mic from 6 to whenever. Mm-hmm. People could come in, sign up early and come back and do it was just a thing that would run for a really long time. We made them so much money because people were just oh, we don't have to buy anything and we like this mic. Let's support it.
Sure.
And not only can we support it, I can get a beer, maybe a couple beers and some fish tacos and not even break $10.
Yes, right. And it's predictable. You know more or less when you're going to go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's neat.
Yeah. And that I feel like more people running open mic should be cognizant of that.
I see. So I like the fact that you're curating this because that's what people want, right? They don't, it's fine, I guess, if there's a place that listed everything.
Yeah.
But what people are looking for is some guidance.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so
it's already intimidating just thinking about like going to see comedy in general and where to start. And if I were to list everything, that would be too much work for me. And then if you were to literally see everything, like on average,
it'd be overwhelming.
There's like almost 100 events a night. And
Is that right?
Yeah. If you count stand up, sketch and improv and everything else.
Yes.
Like
clowns and puppets too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And like art gallery exhibitions that are comedic these days. Or people will do these things where they make like satirical action figures and they'll like rent a space and they'll do a pop-up gallery. Like that's a thing.
Yeah, sure.
And so if you take all of that into account, there's so much. And like if somebody sees that, they're like, I don't know half of these people are what. My hope is that when I curate a list of shows, that if you kind of like any of my tastes, and I have a wide range, maybe you would like some other stuff. And like, if you're just like, oh, this one's a little closer to me or whatever.
Yeah. I trust Jake.
Yeah. I trust Jake.
So my previous guest, Emily Pendergast, who was wonderful, I got to know her from seeing her on Cooking with Gas.
Oh, cool.
Which is the Thursday night Groundling show.
Absolutely.
I'm 95% sure I found that show through Comedy Bureau.
Oh, very cool.
It has to be the case because
it's on there.
Yes, because it's a fantastic show. You know, it's an expensive show.
Oh, yeah.
But it's fantastic.
Well, yeah, the Groundlings,
they provide value.
Yeah.
It's a long show.
Yeah.
And the laughs per minute are super high.
They also have been around almost as long as the Comedy Store.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an institution.
So they have that history and.
So yeah, and I learned about the Comedy Bureau via word of mouth.
When?
That's a good question. I'm sure I've heard about it more than once. The most recent time was as this sabbatical where I'm living in Los Angeles was approaching, I was making an LA to-do list. And someone told me there's like a comedy crawl or something like that.
Right.
And then in that same sort of breath, they told me about the Comedy Bureau.
Oh, wow.
And I put it on the sort of Google Doc that I was creating and sharing with a small group of people.
Right.
But I think I had heard about it years ago too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To just quickly answer sort of the inception and creation of
Please.
it. So for basically a year in trying to find other places to perform, to find out more about comedy, it was a lot of dead ends. A lot of like going to billiards halls or whatever. And like, we haven't had comedy here in 3 years. What are you talking about?
I see.
And like, I lived in Downey at the time, which is in LA County.
But it's 30 miles away.
Yeah. And it's like, so I'm traipsing around and the entirety of LA County, like every night, just trying to find anything.
And you're looking for some stage time.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so as I slowly got to find it and I got to meet more of the comics that were in the scene that were actually doing the same of going out every night, I thought to myself, oh, and also going to all these shows that were supposedly like indie and underground and finding that they weren't amateur at all, that these were people that are really good. And sometimes they're running Conan sets or whatever. There's no central source of information. The LA Weekly doesn't really want to write about it. The LA Times doesn't really want to write about it unless it's like a famous person. But all this stuff is really great and there's a really thriving scene. And I feel like there should be something that like as a central source of information, a hub that people could know about and learn.
There's got to be a better way. It's a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in October of 2010, I like decided like I didn't know where it was going to lead, but after a month of thinking of a name, I came up with a Comedy Bureau and started like a Tumblr, a Twitter and a Facebook page and like started like, hey, these are shows that I know that I think are cool that are coming up and here are the open mics for tonight. And like very quickly, like from month to month to month, I just went further down this rabbit hole of like just reporting on the scene of like going to shows. And I knew in coming up with the name that like, yes, I was a stand-up and I'm still a stand-up and I primarily went to stand-up shows, but I didn't ever want it to be limited to anything. It's not called the Los Angeles Stand-Up Bureau.
Yes, it's the Comedy Bureau.
So it can be so many different things. I legitimately watch as much of any different type of comedy as I do like stand-up. And it like doesn't necessarily have to be limited to LA, even though that's just my purview because I'm only one person and I can only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
And also like it could be anything that it wants. Like currently, you know, it acts like a legitimate resource of information, but like I've gotten to produce an album at a record label. I've gotten to produce live shows. Like it can be any number of things under that banner.
Yeah. So this has really turned into sort of your brand.
Yes.
And then now you have new opportunities you might not have if you had just been doing stand-up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I've gotten to consult and scout for production companies and networks and stuff. And I'm this local expert.
Yes.
Yeah. And I very much enjoy being that person that is like, when people kind of pontificate the idea of a man about town, like I'm literally that.
Well, this is perfect because you look like that.
Yeah.
So people will see this if they see the picture.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things that's striking about you, and I think the first time, at least, I mean, maybe we met before, but we met recently. I did a show with Shane Moss.
Right.
Called Stand Up Science.
At Largo.
Right. And I met you in the lobby.
Yep.
And you have a look.
I have a look.
You're carrying a cane.
Yep.
You wear a hat. You wear a sport coat.
Yep.
I don't know if the word dandy is right, but you have like
it's in the realm of dandy for sure.
It's somewhat like that, but it's a great look.
Right.
It's noticeable. As someone who tries to dress well,
yeah,
I'm appreciative of it.
Thank you very much.
I like that you cut through the clutter.
Right.
How did that happen?
So 8 years ago, I got a pretty big gift card to Banana Republic from my grandma. And I went to Banana Republic and I found this shawl collar cardigan that very much looked like something Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood would be wearing. And that was the thought. It was like, oh, that's like that thing. I kind of like that. I think I'll buy it. I want to wear it. And I did. And it was very nice. And I remember putting on, I'm like, I bet the button downs that I only wear for interviews would probably look nice.
Okay.
And then I did that and it did. And I'm like, I bet those ties that I never wear, I bet that would also look nice.
Okay.
And I was right again.
And when you say you were right, you were getting compliments. Or you just felt good in it.
I felt good. Like I was looking in the mirror.
I see.
And I didn't hate what I was seeing.
They're
like, oh, this is nice. Huh. And thus started this, descent into like a rabbit hole of men's accessories. Where
you have a pocket.
I got a pocket square.
You have like a little,
I got this little pin that's on.
It's sort of in the shape of a flower or star.
Yeah. I got rings. I got but it was trying to gesture dramatically to show off my bracelet and rings.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And I have a hat and hat feathers and like you have
like gold sneakers on right now.
Yeah. And I've gotten to the point, and I think it's still true. 8 years later, I haven't ever worn the same exact outfit.
Okay. That's great.
And that's just like a fun...
Because you can mix and match and accessorize.
Absolutely.
And change around.
Yeah. And often, if I'm at a show and I'm not particularly enjoying a certain segment of the show, I'll just think about what I'm going to wear tomorrow.
That's great.
Yeah.
And now when you perform, are you dressed like this when you perform?
I'm always ready to perform, man.
Okay. That's great. So I have to imagine you get compliments.
Yes.
All the time. Actually, Emily was leaving and she commented on how good you looked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I think is fascinating is I've taken steps more recently than 2008 or 2010, whenever it is you started, or 11 when you started doing this, to start dressing better. It's been this sort of slow progression. First is wearing clothes that fit.
Yeah.
Which is, as a man, is often difficult to do.
Because no one tells you how to do that.
And actually clothes that fit feel weird because you're used to like things swimming on you being really big.
Yeah.
And then, moving kind of to the traditional checking the boxes of this sport coat and the kind of like flat fronts instead of pleats and so on. Matching stuff well and so on. And then getting to the point, and I've actually needed help to do this, what I would call fashion forward.
Right.
And so you're even more forward than fashion forward.
Oh, yeah.
But what I noticed is whenever I wear my fashion forward outfit, I might feel a little bit uncomfortable in. That's when you get a compliment.
Right.
No one ever gives you a compliment when you just wear a normal thing that looks fine.
Right.
No reason to do that.
No.
But when you wear something that's sort of interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one thing I love about LA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a casual town,
Sure.
but people work.
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone,
Right.
but there's enough people out there who work hard.
Mm-hmm.
As I like to say, and this came up in Solo, not to be cross-promoting too much,
It's okay.
is that good fashion is art you wear.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
I don't think the average person thinks of. They think of art as a sculpture or a painting on the wall or a tapestry
Yeah.
or a joke.
Yep.
But I think of it also as being furniture and clothing, things
Right.
that are functional.
Right. Because I think that maybe, you know, they see like Paris Fashion Week or something, and they see a lot of these like runway outfits, and they seem so inaccessible and like,
And uncomfortable and
Yeah.
weird and
Yeah.
yes.
and
that's
then
right.
they ascribe that as like, well, that is fashion.
and thus not accessible.
And thus I am going to not engage with fashion. I'm just going to like go to Ross and get what fits.
Yeah, I get it. Look, I understand it's fine to be utilitarian
Right.
about the
Right.
clothes you wear. I mean,
Right.
they should keep you warm and they should cover, they're going to cover my hairy legs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you want to make life interesting,
Right.
and if you want to be appealing and if you want to create an image,
Right.
look, it would be fine
Mhm.
if the creator and, what do you call yourself? The creator and curator of
Right.
the Comedy Bureau
Yeah.
wore cargo shorts and a t-shirt like a stand-up.
Sure.
I guess that would be fine,
Yeah.
but it just works
Yeah.
so much better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Like when people find out, I mean, I don't know if this was like my,
People remember you, I'll tell you that.
oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know if this was the intention behind it, but like when I tell people I'm the whole person behind the bureau, they're like, of course you are.
Yes.
Of course you are.
It
You-
fits.
Yeah. You dress like this. You're a man about, yeah, you know everything.
A man about town.
Yeah.
For that phrasing, where did you come up with that phrase?
I feel like I heard it in my childhood and probably watching a movie or hearing like
I
an
wonder,
adult
there's
talk.
probably some literary reference to
Right.
a man about town.
Yeah.
Or a song or there must be like
Maybe in a Dickens novel or something.
yeah, it's probably, you know what? I know exactly the person who knows the answer to that question. I'm going to find out.
Great.
I will let you know.
Let me know.
And if any listeners know,
Right.
please send either me or Jake a note.
Please do. Can I give you this advice? You said you wanted more help with being fashion forward.
Please.
So in my understanding and estimation of fashion and how like people that are not fashion designers or models or whatever, like can sort of be more self-actualized in style is to realize like there are certain colors that look good on you, certain cuts
Mm.
and fits that look good on you based on your body type, your face shape, all that sort of thing. And then there's just stuff that you like. Maybe you like a jean jacket. Maybe you like a leather jacket.
Mhm.
Maybe you like short sleeve shirts, or you like unbuttoning the collar, or maybe you like turtlenecks. So if you can find the intersection of those two things,
I see.
of things that look good on you objectively, and then just what you like,
Yes.
that is the start of you finding your style.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you what yours is, and I'll tell you what mine is in a moment. So mine is button-down shirt that has some interesting element to it. Buttonholes are colored a certain way or something like that.
Right.
And then a suit jacket, well-fitted suit jacket, well-fitted suit pants,
Right.
no tie.
Ah,
And that works very well for me
Right.
because I'm long and lean,
right.
and so while the neat thing about a suit jacket is it works well for a guy who's not long and not lean,
Right.
but it works especially well for a long and lean guy.
Right.
And so I have this, and when it's cut well and it's a good thing, it's comfortable. People always think of suits as not being comfortable, but when they're good quality and when they fit well,
Oh, absolutely.
they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I like that for me, and I feel I have that little bit of swagger
Right.
and confidence.
Yeah.
I teach in that.
Oh, that would be a very like commanding sort of look.
Yeah, I teach
Yeah, yeah.
in that, and I like it because I feel like I'm putting on this costume that I'm going to go and perform,
Right.
and I think it's aesthetically pleasing for my students to see.
Yeah.
It says to my students two things. One, it says is Pete cares.
Mm-hmm.
And then also these poor people have to look at me for hours on end. I might as well make the best view possible.
Right. And then also you feel good about yourself.
Indeed.
Because like when you look out in the mirror, even if whatever you got going on internally, if you put together an outfit that looks good on you and you feel confident about it, then like, for better or for worse, you fool everybody, you know?
Yeah, I think that's right. And for me, it's blues. Blues work well for me in terms of my skin color and eye color.
Right.
Gray hair and so on.
So you have like a lot of blue suit jackets?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd imagine what would be cool for you is if getting like a double-breasted blue blazer, maybe out of velvet, get some peak notches.
Very funny.
Yeah.
There's probably 3 steps before I get to that.
Sure.
So what is your intersection?
So
obviously accessories seems to be something that matters.
Yeah, accessory. So
I don't accessorize much.
Yeah, and I don't think everybody needs to either. Anytime, like, I talk with especially guys about style, like, you don't need to copy me. Mm. Like, do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, if you're not about like having a watch or rings or whatever, like, you don't need to do that. Like, I love how fussy some people get about like denim weights. Like, they're like obsessive about denim. Like, it's not anything that's really crazy, but like, it's obviously very well made, selvage Japanese denim. They know how it's like made, where it's made.
I can imagine like audience members thinking, what the hell is he talking about?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I love anybody who's obsessive about their particular style and how they do it, you know?
I like to say, have a plan.
Yeah.
And if it's cargo shorts and a t-shirt,
yeah,
that's fine, but at least have a plan.
Yeah. For me, it's necessarily intersection anymore so much as like, I guess what I like to do is sort of be like dapper, but still like kind of disruptive. So people always say that I dress well, but there are a lot of these arbitrary menswear rules. If you like look back into the history of menswear that are really stupid and really restrictive. And like, it even get down to the point of like, so if you're wearing a sport coat versus a blazer, which, I mean, the differences between that it's a very gray area.
Yeah, minor.
Yeah, you would have to wear a derby versus an Oxford shirt.
I see.
And I think that's dumb.
I see, yeah.
So along those lines, I like wearing Oxford shoes with denim jackets.
Okay.
Or I'll wear a tuxedo jacket and I'll have high tops on.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's sort of this balancing act of like still like being very classy and put together and using color coordination and all these sorts of things and certain hats and whatnot and ties, whether it be a bow tie or ascot, and just kind of figuring this stuff that like seemingly wouldn't go together. But
okay, so here's what I like about it is the rules.
Yeah.
You follow the rules for the most part, but you find the rules to break.
Yeah.
It's very comedic.
Thank you. And sometimes I break them real big.
I see.
One of my favorite outfits I ever put together, I had this rodeo shirt. Mm-hmm. It's this like very thick button down that has all this like woven detailing on it of like a rose. Has red stitching and like these white pearl buttons. And then I had this sort of giant gold statement necklace on. And then on top of that, I had a cape. And then I had a red hat that had a flat.
That's a big night.
Right. And then on top of that, I wore these like designer track pants that had patterns on and white leather running shoes.
Okay, that's a big night.
Yeah. And I walked around. I went on the Comedy Store stage like that.
Okay.
It was great.
Now, do you do comedy about your dress? Or do you just let it speak for itself?
So I don't
I can imagine doing an opening joke about.
Right. I haven't read specific bits about it so much as like I'll like work it in, like it'll accent like things that I talk about.
I see.
Yeah. I haven't specifically come up with like a bit about it.
Yeah, that's fine. I just was curious about it.
Right.
So I'm glad we got to talk about that. So you had mentioned something in passing about you had a strange heckler.
Yeah. So last night. So I was doing a stand-up show at a bar, which happens a lot in LA.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So right around when this podcast gets released, I have a book coming out called Shtick to Business.
Right.
What the Masters of Comedy can teach you about breaking rules, being fearless, and building a serious career.
Right.
So it's a sort of an entertaining business book.
Right.
And I had an idea for the book that never made it in.
Yeah, what's that?
So there's like 14 lessons in the book, and they all have these kind of fun names, you know. So one's Create a Chasm, and one's called Third Thoughts,
right,
and so on. One's called Work Hard or Hardly Work.
Right.
So one of the ideas was, and it wasn't a very good name, but it was called Nicely Confident. And I think in hindsight, if I had more time, I would have been able to fit it into the book. But the idea was, and please indulge me because I'm going to go off a little on a tangent, was there's this sort of, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, and this is a very LA thing, is that oftentimes the most accomplished, capable people are the nicest.
Yeah.
And the aspiring people are kind of the coldest.
Yeah.
Had that experience?
I wouldn't say that I had that experience across the board, maybe off the top of my head, but definitely it resonates.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, why is that the case? Like, why is it that the sort of most successful people can sort of be the friendliest and most magnanimous and so on? Like some of it, you know, kind of comes from this like, oh, I don't have anything to prove anymore. You know, I've done it, you know. And I was thinking about this within the world of comedy, you know, like how is it that like a comedian can be on stage and be so friendly and so warm with the audience and so confident.
Right.
What they're doing is incredibly scary.
Oh, yeah.
And what can make that really scary is that you have sort of a heckler who's going to try to just undercut you.
Sure.
What I realized was that the most accomplished comedians can handle a heckler. Not only do they have the advantage of a microphone and a PA and the security, is that they have the experience. They're smarter than the heckler.
Right.
And so what they will do is they will destroy the heckler.
Right.
And they're not doing it for themselves.
No.
They're doing it for everyone else in the audience.
Absolutely.
And so they're acting actually with the most pure intentions.
Yeah.
As I said, I never did anything with that idea.
Right.
But as I was researching it, I was asking comedians about hecklers. And what they told me was it actually happens surprisingly infrequently.
Yeah.
Like there's other problems with the audience.
Sure.
Todd Glass in an episode said, the problem with an audience is not a heckler. It's table talk.
Yeah.
It's people chit-chatting with their friends.
Yeah.
And so on. So when I hear there's a heckler story, I'm like, what is it?
Right.
So what is it?
So it's interesting you said all those things. For the most part, I think that is the common narrative with dealing with hecklers, but this one is particularly strange for a certain number of reasons. So there are so many stand-up shows that happen at bars in LA, and I was doing one of those. And in getting to the venue, I was crossing the street, and as I finished crossing the street, out of kind of nowhere, I hear, "Do you have $1? You look like you have $1. I'm a psychic."
All right.
Weird string of sentences to say. Definitely not something I instinctually want to engage with. I look over.
I usually keep moving in that
situation. As I'm sort of keeping moving, I look over and there's this youngish woman who clearly does not look homeless. And she's in like a red hoodie and black tights or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then I just keep moving. And I think she continues to mutter. And I thought that was going to be it.
All right.
Yet, as I got in the bar and, you know, I check in and the show starts and it's going along, I notice somewhere halfway through the show, and I'm later on in the show, she wanders into the bar. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe she lives around here. Maybe she's just weird.
Sure, of course. It's LA. This filled with
a
quirky people.
Yes, that, you know, mostly just want to be heard. So I'm about to go up, and then I notice that she's sitting up front. And I'm like, okay, I really hope this isn't going to be a thing.
But your spidey sense is going off.
So I start off and like I'm doing pretty well. A lot of times I never think of myself as a crowd work comedian, but I've noticed over the last 3 years I chat with the audience a lot.
All right.
And it's not even to segue into bits. I like actually want to interact with them and have like the jokes that
As an aside, we're not going to have time to get into this, but you had a show Jay Kroeger dates the audience.
Yes, I did.
So you had the audience sit across from you at a little table.
Yeah, and we went on an actual sort of date where there was like drinks, and then via a screen we got to go to a museum anywhere in the world because you can do that through Google.
So you have you can do this.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been doing stand-up for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you say destroy hecklers. So whenever I've dealt with hecklers, I usually try to be very nice and try to guilt people into shutting up.
Oh, okay.
So like a lot of times, usually what works with,
I just think of like Joan Rivers or Bill Burr or Doug,
and that fits in with their persona. But I have this sort of charm and I'm very nice. So if someone gets a little too chatty, I'm like, excuse me, can you please be quiet because you're going to ruin the bit.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay.
And then they'll be like, oh my God. And then they notice that everybody's looking at them and they're like, all right.
Yeah. That's good. It shows there's more than one way to do this.
Yeah. And people have like really thanked me. Like, you didn't escalate any of the situation. They just shut up and everything went back to be nice. Like, yeah, that's kind of how I want to keep things.
That's great.
So everybody is with me and on my side as I'm going through this, but I open with a bit where I ask the audience this question and she immediately pipes in not one answer, but like 3. And I'm like, okay, usually people take a while to answer this question. Why don't you hold up and let everybody else participate? And she just kept chiming in and I'm like trying to like get through my act, which I, for various reasons, like keeping very flexible and open. But as I'm trying to like tell her, like just deal with her, she just won't be quiet. And now I'm like, will you please be quiet? And she's like, oh, okay. And then she would pipe up and say like, oh, that's a bowler that you got there.
She was drawn to your look.
I guess.
I think that explains a little bit of it.
Right. And where it got weird was where I'm like, so I wasn't even wearing a bowler. I was wearing a fedora. I mentioned that. And I'm like, you got the hat wrong. You need to be quiet now.
Uh-huh.
Is she just started saying words. She was like misogyny, hats, cat, like she just like a word generator spitting out words. And I'm like, oh, this person just wants to ruin my set.
I see. And she might not even have full control.
Right. Yeah, it very well may have been that she'd been on drugs or something.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, but also I have the wherewithal to know that, like, she wants me to be combative. Mm-hmm. She wants me to lose it and yell at her.
I see.
And I don't want to give that to her.
It doesn't seem like it's in your nature.
No, it's not. So that's where I sort of, like, step back and, like, hey, does everybody want to hear the end of this joke? And I would get an applause from the audience. And I would get to the end of the joke, and then she would chime in again. I'm like, okay, well, does anyone want to hear that I lost my virginity at 32? And people were like, yeah!
Yeah, of course.
And I just got enough hooting and hollering from the crowd that, for me, where that sort of superseded her being a pester, like a real annoyance. But it just, I had dealt with hecklers that would, pipe in, be kind of asinine, but then they'd end up being quiet. But I hadn't someone.
Because of the power of the crowd.
Right. But someone with an agenda to be like, oh, I'm going to follow this guy in.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say agenda is after I got off stage, the next 2 comics, she didn't move her seat. She didn't say anything.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. There was something about you that drew her.
Yeah. And so that was just very weird to see.
You can tell you're still sort of processing it.
Yeah, because the set was still good. Like, everybody enjoyed it, but I also, it's sort of tainted because I had to deal with her.
Right.
Yeah. And it was weird.
Okay. That's too bad.
Yeah.
But it's a learning experience.
Oh, it's a learning experience for sure. And I still think I came out like, as weird as I feel about it, I still came out ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't lose my cool.
Yeah, in the long run, you'll be better off for it.
Oh, yeah.
So, last question. I'm going to adjust my normal ending question.
Okay.
So, my normal question is, what are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really good?
I was expecting that one.
But I'm going to change it because you are the creator and curator of the Comedy Bureau.
Yes, I am.
So, what comedy that's happening in LA these days that is really good? Like, if someone was coming to visit or, here I am on sabbatical,
right?
Where would you point me to something that you feel like kind of stands out?
How specific do you want? You talk about venue-wise, show-wise?
You can, 2 or 3 things that you think would be worth the trip.
Right. So if it's out-of-towners coming into town, I would definitely point them to Hot Tub with Kurt and Kristen.
Okay, at the Virgil.
At the Virgil. That's
Yes.
every Monday, 8 o'clock sharp. One of the only indie shows that happens, if you check your watch, it happens 8 o'clock on the dot every single Monday.
It's well run.
So well run.
That's
and
nice.
almost no other show.
I've been to that show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a neat venue.
Yeah. And the bookers and the producers are very good about like getting a great balance of new people in town, and established people, and on top of having Kurt and Kristen doing whatever they want to do.
Okay.
So that's like a great sort of indie stand-up show, and you get to be in this cool venue that isn't really a comedy club, although sometimes they have like comedy 7 nights a week if the schedule sort of permits
Okay.
it. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a comedy club.
Right.
It feels like a theater bar kind of thing.
I would urge people to check out something weird and cool at the Lyric Hyperion.
That's new to me.
So Lyric Hyperion Theater and Cafe, it's on Hyperion Avenue in Silver Lake.
And what's it called? What's the...
Well, so that's the venue.
Okay.
And like up until very recently, if you wanted to go see the sort of like boundary pushing performance arty comedy you would see at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, you'd have to go to Edinburgh for that.
Okay.
But this has sort of become a hub, or you'd have to go to UCB after midnight when they have midnight shows. That's when they do their experimental comedy. But now this place, the Lyric Hyperion, when people are like developing solo shows, and as the years have progressed, I think the term solo show has gotten less and less stigma attached to it. And people are trying different, weirder, darker, more interesting things, whether they're more personal or more absurd. Like it's become a space and a hub for that sort of thing.
I see.
It's really defying genre and definition, and it's just like trying to be something else. That's why I'm just saying the venue.
Just the venue. Just look for something at the venue.
Yeah, because they have so many interesting things that happen there all the time. I mean, there's a show that on Valentine's Day called, what is it called? You're going to love this. And the whole premise of the show is all these female comedians doing a presentation on some guy they dated, like telling them what they would like.
I see.
They're like,
Or
oh,
mansplaining.
Oh, Star Wars, you're going to love it. And they're like, so I sat and watched all the Star Wars, and I'll tell you what, and it's just.
That's fun.
Yeah. And it's a whole show. So like, they let me do that weird show where I got to date the audience.
Yes, I see.
At that place. So I really, really, really love that.
So give me one more.
So I
know there's a lot, but.
Right. The third one. So I don't know if you caught on. I'm trying to like capture all the disciplines in the comedy.
Okay.
So for improv, I would, do you know who Heather Ann Campbell is?
No.
Heather Ann Campbell to me is one of the funniest improvisers of all time. I mean, the new iteration of Whose Line Is It Anyway, she's certainly done, and she's written everywhere, whether it be SNL. I think she like writes on the Twilight Zone right now.
I might recognize her then.
Yeah. She is the co-host of a podcast called How Did This Get Played? She's just so funny in so many different ways. But Heather, whenever she does improv, it's like some of the funniest stuff of all time. You've seen improv in LA. Are you familiar with Cage Match?
Only a name.
So Cage Match is this weekly sort of like mini tournament where these two teams meet up and the audience votes on which improv team is better.
Okay.
And
is it like a short form kind of comedy?
Long
sports?
form.
Oh, it's long form.
It's long form. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it's two long form improv teams, and they go head to head, and they do 20 minutes each, and the winning team gets to return the next week.
Oh, okay.
So Heather has been on a team that has gone 78 weeks in a row undefeated.
Are you kidding me?
No, and a team that's gone 74 weeks in a row undefeated, separate from that one.
Wow. She's like a linchpin.
Uh-huh.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So tell me her last name.
Campbell.
Campbell. Okay.
Heather Ann Campbell.
Perfect.
Yeah. Those would be my 3 recommendations.
Those are great recommendations.
Yeah, man.
They're great. When is Cage Match and where is it?
So Cage Match is at UCB Franklin, 11 p.m. every Wednesday.
Oh, that's why I haven't seen it.
Because it's late.
Yes.
That's the fun thing. So long form improv, which I happen to like more than short form, because people get to be a little more expressive, a little more crazy, because there's less boundaries.
Yes. You have time.
You have time. And because it's at 11 o'clock's almost an hour. People, you're in the mood to like, all right, let's get a little weird.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you get to see people break rules in improv, and they're like pimping people out and like killing each other in scenes.
I see. All the things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, which is great.
Well, Jake, this podcast was long overdue.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you got in under the wire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And so Comedy Bureau, what is the Twitter handle?
So everything across platforms is at The Comedy Bureau.
At The Comedy Bureau.
Yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr.
I'll put it in the exhibits, but people should know it. So you folks, if you're in LA, you come to LA, you know the place to look, and then look for the dapper guy with the cane.
The cane and the hat, usually in the back.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.
Yo.